All right, it's Friday night, time for an evidence-based triathlete podcast. Hey Ted, how's it going?
Oh man, it's going good. It's been a good week. I continue to recover, and every day gets a little bit better for me. So yeah, I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to a nice weekend. The weather's finally turning. It's beautiful out, so it's time to go.
Yeah, this is great weather. And typically, we always kid around that we should name this podcast Two Guys Talking Triathlon, which is what a lot of times we do, and we love the sport. But it's always nice to have a guest. And tonight we've got a special guest. We've got Brandon Burchak. Hey, Brandon, how's it going?
I'm doing great, guys. It's really an honor to team up with you a bit and discuss some of the things that we've all been working on. So I really love it. Thank you.
Well, and I'm glad you're here because, we talk about high performance and we talk about high performance athletes. And, our city has blown up in terms of professional sports and, high-end
Yeah.
athletes. But I always remind people that we've always had high performing athletes here in town. And like you, because you've been part of the artistic shows at different locations at casinos. And, it's just unbelievable that, well, it's not unbelievable, but it's really amazing the type of athletes we've had here in town for a long period of time. And you've been one of them. So it's going to be a lot of fun sort of tapping into your expertise in high performance sports from a breathing end. And I know that's going to be, I posted on Facebook already that you hold your breath for 25 minutes, and that is just unreal.
Yeah, I actually did a 20-minute breath hold earlier today. So
As you do.
yeah, yeah, we're preparing for some stuff we've got cooking on television soon. So just
Oh,
doing a little bit of training. Our technical director was over to safety it, and yeah, we hit some decent numbers.
that's
So
great.
all good. Yeah.
Well, we're going to dive into this a bit because breathing is so important in endurance sports. But before we go down that path, Ted and I have a couple of tri talk things to go through. So, Ted, what do you got?
Well, first of all, I want to, and I didn't tell you I was going to do this. I want to congratulate John. He won overall the sprint distance triathlon last week at Cocopelli.
Mm.
And so congratulations to you. How long has it been since you actually won a race overall?
It's been a while, so
It's been a
I
while.
figure
So,
I should have gone to look, but I don't know. But yeah, no, that
so,
was pretty
so,
neat.
so congratulations. It does, honestly, people like it doesn't happen all the time.
No,
I think I've only won two in all my career where I actually was the overall winner of the race. So congratulations, John. That was awesome. I was so excited when I saw
yeah.
your
Well,
results.
well, thank you, and people who follow this know that there were some neat challenges to work through, and it was a total surprise to me too, because I was just going in to really try to focus on giving a good effort, and it just happened to come out that way. So that was fun. But so thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the second thing is we're going to talk a little bit about Shimano. So this week, yesterday, there was a huge recall of Shimano cranks that many people have because it spanned like 5 years of production. So for Dura Ace cranks and Ultegra cranks, and I know many people because it's pretty much the most popular company and the most popular crank set out there, especially for higher performing athletes. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, have a look at it. And I saw some of the catastrophic failures that had actually occurred in these. The chances of you having one are pretty rare,
Hmm.
but it's a good idea to get it checked out by a bike shop and make sure that you're not going to be one of those, because if it does fail, it could be actually quite dangerous.
And
So
someone already posted that they checked theirs and they have that crank. Fortunately, I don't.
I have two of them.
Oh,
No, seriously, I have two of those cranks. And I went and looked at both of them and I saw, is there any delamination or there? But I mean, I don't have the discerning eye, like, so I'm going to bring mine into a bike shop and have those looked at. Secondly, is there's always rumors on the internet about fake Shimano products.
hmm.
So I'm building a bike right now, and I ordered an inner chainring, and I was like, I went onto Amazon and I ordered an inner chainring, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get, I need a Shimano inner chainring, the specific size, and I got it, and I took it out of the package. I'm like, this is not right, and so this is what I got, and it looks like a nice chainring, and it's stamped on the wrong spot, Shimano 11S 36 MB, which it should be. And I'm like, oh, so I went on the internet and I'm like, looked what it should look like, and it looked nothing like it. It should look like this. You can tell the difference in the shine. And this one's got a silver ring inside. This one, there's no silver ring inside. The packaging, can you tell which one's real, which one's fake? No, you can't. Because my wife, after long looking, she could tell there's some differences. So that being said, be careful when you buy things, and kind of know what you're looking for. And so it was interesting. I was telling my wife about this, and she's like, "Well, who would fake a $36 chain ring?" Well, when you can make it for $1, right, and sell it for 36, that's, there's a market there. So the only place I could find the image of this one was on Alibaba, the fake one.
Oh boy.
And so anyways, this is going back, and I wrote, in my thing, the reason I'm returning it, but I'm worried they're just going to go sell it again.
Sure.
Right. And part of me doesn't even want to put it back into circulation, right? Even though, because how Amazon is, it'll end up on somebody's bike. And speaking of failures, I mean, it may or may not fail. It may, but it's not a genuine part. So I just wanted to add just a little bit of stuff tonight. And once again, just for people that might be interested. So there we go.
It's interesting. On my handlebars behind me that got recalled, they gave me the option of sending it back or marking it in a way that it would never be used. And so I had to actually damage it in order to keep it. And I said, oh, I want to keep it. And so I had to take pictures of the damage that I made to it. So I don't know.
Maybe what I'll do is I'll write on the package when I send it back, this is fake.
Yeah. Right.
This is counterfeit. That's what I should do. So then I get my money back. And yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, who's going to cheat the system? I don't get it. I don't know. I'm trying to make a segue to Brandon now, and Brandon is not. He is the real thing.
He's the real thing. As far as we know, we haven't done an actual DNA test on him to know if he's human, because holding your breath for 25 minutes seems inhuman to me. So I'm not exactly sure if he's human or alien or something. But
I've tried to go and just hold my breath for 2 minutes, and I can't even make it a minute. So
no, you can if we do one decent work session, we'll have you up to 5 minutes without too much trouble.
I love it. Well, I want to hear more about that, but I want to give you a chance to give your background, your athletic background, and then I want to lead into how you discovered that you have this ability, or even that you thought this would be interesting to do. So give us a big picture background of yourself.
Right. So I was an All-American gymnast, and I was a 2-time NCAA champion in diving. And then I had a pretty long career with Cirque du Soleil and Dragon, and I had a juggling act, and I did a lot of high-risk acrobatics. I was a competitive high diver. I did 6 somersaults from Russian swing, and trapeze and things like that. So it was mostly high risk stuff. I've always been really drawn to those really unique moments where you can kind of push it hard and kind of roll the dice a little bit.
Oh, I love that. I mean, that's so exciting. And now, how long have you been in Las Vegas then? Are you from Las Vegas originally, or?
So I'm originally from New York, but I was working for Dragon Entertainment for actually the largest production show in the world in a quaint little city called Wuhan, China. Pre-pandemic, it was called the Han Show. It was like $400 million. It was like the wildest thing in the world. Even when we finished creating the show, I specifically remember everybody sitting around together and saying, nobody's ever going to remember Wuhan for anything other than this show. And then, fast forward a couple years, and all bets are off on that one. So I moved to Vegas with my wife, Melissa, who's a former Broadway performer. She was the lead dancer in Hairspray in Chicago and Mamma Mia. And we opened our production company here. The last the last show that I did was O, which is the water show here in Las Vegas. So that was sort of like a nice end of my career. It's not, yeah, it was great. Such an honor to be part of that production. So such a good way to sort of round that out. And then, yeah, and then I've been, as you know, John, as we have been working together recently, gone down this really long, kind of crazy rabbit hole in the world of blood profiles and breath work. I met David Blaine about 15 years ago because a mutual friend of mine and David's was consulting him to do a high dive essentially. And at the time, Dave was really into breath holding. He had just broken the world record at 17 minutes. And I was super, super enamored with that whole concept. And I really wanted to use that concept as a vehicle to create some sort of performance art where I would be active underwater for a really long time, not just, 2 or 3 minutes like your traditional kind of magic or escape act, but something a little bit more substantive. So in the end, we've done some performances around the world, and I do about an 11-minute active breath hold in the performance where I'm like acting and moving around, but it's very much not in the styling of magic. It's really just a kind of a performance art, and at the end of the day, it's really just training. It just comes down to all the research and the information that we've kind of proffered out of this whole experience. Initially when I was getting started in this, I had to kind of pitch my concept to different physicians or friends from different sports teams or Olympic facilities and things like that. And, I really had to sell them on this whole concept that I thought was possible based on a tiny understanding of how it all could possibly work. And then as we went further and further into it, now we're constantly being sought out by different, professional sports teams and management companies and things like that, and even military, because we've kind of created a skeleton key to the nervous system, and we've learned some super interesting things about how to actuate the blood profile before a really big sporting event, whether it's football or track and field or hockey or UFC. And so with some of those proclivities, you can really turn these athletes into super, super, super human, just absolute monsters. I work with a UFC fighter who is a former champion, and he calls it the Ninja Turtle ooze, is what we've given him, because he's so uniquely capable now in terms of his capacity to deal with blood acidosis and his lactic acid profile and his cardio. Even his hemoglobin size and the ferritin bed in the hemoglobin is exorbitantly better than any of his peers. VO2 max is really at astonishing levels, and even more impressive is the VCO2 max, which is just astronomical now, because we take somebody and we teach them how to hold their breath for 5 minutes. And so what does that mean for a UFC fighter? Well, it means that you're probably virtually impossible to choke out, because if you can do 5 minutes without breathing, then you're going to be a tough riddle to solve in some of the issues that they're going to come into in a fight. So we have a bunch of really, really unique strategies where we address some of that with the athletes. So for example, and I've told you this one before, it's really, really difficult for any UFC fighter to train the 5th round, because the 5th round requires that you train 4 rounds prior, right? So the issue there is that you're doing so much, you're taxing so much the hardware to get to that. So your knees, your back, your neck, everything, right? It's really, really difficult to train that 5th round. So in a fight camp, you only get so many 5th rounds that you're able to train in preparation. However, what we do with our UFC fighters is we simulate a blood profile that's almost exact to how they will be after the 4th round. We do that with various breath holding and breath work. And then after that, he then goes and he hits pads, or he hits the bag, or he does some targeted sparring for 5 minutes. then after that, he comes back and we do more breath work, and then he hits the pads again. So in that way, we're only training the software of the fighter. We're not taxing the hardware because we're simulating that fifth round over and over again. So he's not required to do those first 4 rounds to get his body to that sort of state. And we totally preserve the body so that when he finishes the fight camp, he's not as banged up as his opponent. And he's logged about 50 fifth rounds, as opposed to his opponent who may have only logged 6 or 7, something like that. So it's a huge, 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 huge advantage on top of, you know, some of the stuff that we've discussed about the blood profile and just exacerbating your EPO levels naturally and creating a better ferritin bed in the hemoglobin, having better access to your 4 ports of entry on the hemoglobin, making sure that you're able to utilize all the oxygen you have in the body really, really effectively, really easily, and starting that fight with a super premium blood profile so that when you go into it, you're even a little bit more alkaline than you would be normally. So the effective tiredness that's going to come on down the road is going to hit later, and you have a built-in like armor against it, this tolerance to your CO2 levels. So you're not breathing through the mouth, you're super, super comfortable, and you just go in there like Godzilla.
I love that.
That's awesome.
I want to, Ted, I want to jump in, and I know you've got
I'm
to go.
I'm just blown away. Like, so
I
go
know,
ahead.
and that's what this is amazing how you're talking about meeting with David Blaine, and then that was sort of your interest into the breath holding. But I just want to emphasize the amount of learning you've done over this period of time, and now you've become a student of being able to hold your breath and the physiology around breathing. It's really amazing the amount of knowledge that you've amassed in this in putting together this project and this act that you did. But just so people get a sense of the context, when you first started holding your breath, how long were you doing it? And we've already established that you did a 20-minute hold this morning. So
Yeah. So when I started, I've always had like a pretty decent proclivity for water-based activities, and as a former diver, I've always really been in love with the water aspect of my whole career. I think I could do around like 3.5 minutes, I think, when I started.
yeah.
So, which is, it's not a big number, but it's probably on the upper end of somebody without a really strong kind of database and operating procedure for how this all works. And then actually, unfortunately, while I was in China, I had a circus accident and I fell from about 90 feet and I collapsed my lungs and I had to get rescued. I was put on this gurney. We were like racing through the back streets of China to the hospital. And I woke up on inside this really big Soviet era breathing machine to auto inflate my lungs because they had collapsed and they weren't inflating themselves. So, and actually, so I wake up and I'm like, oh boy, this is bad. And I'm kind of looking around and the machine is really noisy. And I'm like, oh, I've really done it on this one. And my part of the production team came in, the artistic director and my head of physio, who is just a dear, dear friend of mine who essentially saved my life. And this little doctor walks in and I kind of look around and I see these oxygen bottles in the corner. So I know that it's like not great. And then the doctor walks in and he's smoking a cigarette. And I was like, oh my God. It's like, we're gonna blow a hole in the side of this building. It's like, so I was on the breathing machine for a couple weeks, and then it was a really, 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 really long road to rehab on that one. And I was devastated because I had just been investing all this time and energy and economic resource into this concept that I was chasing. So I had to get really, really serious about it to sort of recuperate some of those losses and some of the permanent damage that was done to my lungs. I have kind of a belt of permanent scar tissue in the bottom of my lungs where they never really came back out. So I was, really behind the 8 ball on that one. And then I just started calling up everybody I knew, from different sports teams, Olympic facilities in the US and in Europe, even in the pro cycling world, and just everybody that I could possibly get in touch with who might have some evidence-based protocol about what my options were and how to further investigate my my intentions with that. And then it just kind of spiraled out of control. I ended up garnering all of these super unique consultants like yourself and Dr. Donahue and Dr. Hollister and Al Light and everybody under the sun to really make this project come to life. And then eventually we overcame more or less what exists as the baser book of knowledge in this realm, and we started to do our own research and development to keep pushing it further. And so it's been a really, really unique process. We'll see. We've got some interesting things planned for this year, and I'd love to hit the 30-minute mark this coming year if possible. There's a couple of really unique things I have to do in my training and my preparation to do that, but I think it's within our range. So we'll see how it goes.
I love that story because it talks about, getting injured, which is terrible, but it ended up forcing you to learn more about the physiology of breathing, and that has led to where you are now. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Ted because I jumped in on Ted. So, oh, you're muted, Ted.
Sorry. We're good. I have the first question I have is, what did you study in college? So you said you were in college or national champion in college, but what did you study?
So I was originally getting a degree for zoology, and then I broke my back and was no longer able to dive for the US and stuff like that. So everything just shifted, and I ended up transferring schools, and then I got a degree in literature. So, who knows? Bit of a mixed bag there.
So the reason I'm asking is because I have this conversation with my students all the time. Is you aren't what your degree necessarily is, right? You can learn anything given the right environment and the right stimulus. Just because you have a degree in this and you did all this schooling doesn't mean you can't learn on your own. You don't have a degree in exercise physiology or a degree in physiology, but to me, you sound like, so far an expert in blood physiology, and you obviously learned this on your own, and you did it. I mean, no offense, you're not a teenager anymore, right? You did it a little bit later in your life. And I keep telling my students, this is like, it doesn't end when you finish school. Right?
Yeah.
This is just the beginning. And
that's right.
Like that's what I'm so enthralled with, is people that actually they make a pivot in their life and they go on and they do something awesome that that wasn't in their formative years, even though like diving and stuff was in your formative years and you could hold your breath and things like that. But I'm enamored by that. And so can you tell me a little bit about how you did that and how you did that kind of pivot?
So I would say that one of my best skills in, my life is that I'm really good at designing and investigating and creating like training matrices for like a specific goal, right? And so whatever my intention is, I have a really good knack of making sure I've kind of turned over every stone and really tried to make sure that I'm ticking all the boxes, creating a program, and then activating it over the course of a couple of years or something like that. So, for example, another accident that I had in the circus, because I've had a couple. I was supposed to land on a mat that was recessed into the stage, and it was not there. It was just concrete. So I landed like flat on my back. I was in a very brief little coma. And when I came to, I couldn't use my hands really at all. And I had speech recall issues and all sorts of these issues, right? So now I have this like really, really unique um, difficulty. I have to come up with a plan for this and how I'm going to activate recovery properly and sort of address all these concerns that I have about getting back up to full capacity. So I took a one-way ticket to Paris and I started working as a street performer juggling for about 2 years because it was going to really engage my conscious proprioception. I'm going to have to walk around. I'm going to have to use my hands a lot. I'm going to juggle. So then my goal was to like become, you know, a really great juggler. And I was totally delusional because I thought that I thought I could, you know, maybe hit that really, really top tier in the juggling world. But one of the issues there is that, you know, all these other jugglers have started when they're like 3, 4 years old and they come from these circus families and stuff. So I got good enough to have an act in Cirque du Soleil as a juggler, and that was a really great sort of like footnote in that journey. And it all really spun from moving to Paris, you know, having no plan, really just walking the streets and juggling for 6 to 8 hours a day for about 2 years, and having a really, really tight protocol about how my training was profiled and what I would practice and how I'd practice it. And then in a couple of years, I'm doing really similar an act that, well, you know, an act in Cirque du Soleil or Dragon Entertainment, and that really doesn't stem from my abilities as a juggler, because juggling is super teachable. It's like learning an instrument or a language. It's really just about how you process the training information. And my success there had nothing to do with my physical capacities. It was about how I created the training profile for myself and how I investigated the needs that I would have to accomplish that. So that was one of my first really big exercises in creating a much broader matrix for something that I wanted to do. Even also when I broke my back, I had a similar situation. I wanted to come back and I wanted to keep diving. So I had to really formulate a mindful approach to that process. And then the year after I broke my back, I won NCAA nationals. So I had a really similar strong recovery in that sense. And I was able to apply the profile that I wanted for the goals that I had intended for. And so then when I got into the breath holding context of things, I did that, but on a whole nother scale, much more in depth and over a much longer period of time than the diving or gymnastics or juggling or anything like that. So, and of course I had all these super unique resources like Dr. Mercer, who I would just call up randomly and ask him about something about VO2 max, and we would chat for 20 minutes and I'd go write some stuff down in my notebooks and do what other investigation I could online. I've, you know, read thousands of medical papers on EPUB in the last few years, and even some of the stuff that's quite novel and new, as Dr. Mercer knows, we're really pushing beyond a lot of those capacities. My blood pH in a long 10-minute active breath hold where I'm moving for, you know, virtually the whole 10 minutes, we hit a blood pH of like 6.9 essentially, which is really only seen in like a coma victim. But I'm conscious and aware, and I'm totally fine because we've moved that sort of dial so far, and you can train against that CO2 acidosis over time, and you can accrue a really unique resistance to it in a way that your body is still able to, you know, activate the oxygen off of your hemoglobin and replace it with your CO2, and you're still okay like throughout that whole process. And that's one of the really great jewels that we have for any athlete, is allowing them the capacity to operate properly even at a much more acidic blood profile, and it keeps them from, you know, having to purge that CO2 during their sport, during their event, because they're comfortable with such a different level there.
Awesome. So,
Oh,
so John, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna, yeah, sorry. I was gonna say thank you for those kind words. First of all, no name calling, so it's John on this podcast. So thank you.
John.
And I've always felt bad though, because we talked about some neat plans to do some measurements, and then the world stopped and we weren't
Yeah.
able to get things done. And we've had a change in faculty and so forth. But, I think there's some really neat things to do. But I want to circle back now because you've said it a couple times. I don't think a lot of people know what even drives breathing. Like, why do I have an urge to breathe? And I remember the first time we met, and I was actually so impressed that you knew, because not everyone actually knows that. It seems so basic, but yet a lot of people don't know. So, talk a little bit about that. And then I want to maybe highlight some of the keys to holding breaths. And then I want to apply it back to endurance sports. Why would an endurance athlete want to know about this, or what can they do?
Right. So if you hold your breath right now, if any of us do, right, take a big breath of air, then eventually you're going to have the urge to breathe. And what a lot of people don't understand is that that's not driven by how much oxygen you have left in your tank, essentially, right? It really comes down to your blood pH, which is driven by your CO2 levels. So if you hold your breath and you get the urge to breathe, it's because at all times your body is doing a real-time calculation of your blood pH, which is driven by the amount of CO2. And so that's your body's way of sort of reverse engineering how much oxygen you would have, because they are directly related. However, your body isn't resourcing that information by checking in on how much O2 you have. It's done by how much CO2 you have. So when you learn and practice how to hold your breath for longer, what you're doing is you're building up a tolerance to your CO2 acidosis, and you're creating a buffer between you and the urge to breathe. And then you're also learning to deal with that urge to breathe when it happens, because it shouldn't trigger like fear in the body. It's really just information. So it's like if you do a cold plunge, it's horrible the first time you've ever done it. But if you do it every day for 2 weeks, you can rewire how your body responds to that, and you can even find like enjoyment and pleasure out of it. So what we really want to do is we want to create a training profile that rewires that in a way that you're creating a positive Pavlovian response to that information. So then when it's, whether it's cold exposure or whether it's heightened levels of CO2 and your blood is becoming more acidotic, that you're only understanding that as a parcel of information, and you're not triggering anything in your nervous system that's aligning that with fear or another sort of sense of panic, anything like that. So you're able to deal with it extremely rationally, assess what your CO2 levels are, assess your oxygen levels, assess your heart rate, your stroke volume, your blood pressure, and have a really, really good, keen understanding of that in the body, so that you're totally rational through the whole process, and you're just understanding it as like a parcel of information. And then there's all sorts of other stuff that you can do in the body that allows you to take that limit even further. For example, when you hold your breath, you have something called the mammalian diving reflex, and that lowers your heart rate, it drops your blood pressure. And that's because as mammals, as soon as you submerge your face in water, that just happens instantly. But you can exacerbate that even further to a degree that, for example, I can autonomously clench my spleen to release more red blood cells, red and white blood cells, but the white blood cells don't help in a breath hold. But and that's just sort of like an extra bonus of additional hemoglobin and hematocrit and RBCs that are going to help you get a little bit further. And you can do that intentionally, consciously, if you have worked enough in that sense and you have a good understanding of that. It's like activating a muscle that you didn't know you have. And so you can do that before a fight. You can do that before a triathlon. You can do that for anything. And then immediately you're going to get this really, really unique bump of additional red blood cells. And, we're also going to train the athlete in a protocol where they're going to start that event at a slightly more alkaline blood profile. So then even further, they're going to get tired later and less. So you have like a two-hinged activation for that concept.
Okay, so I mean, everyone's probably watching this and thinking, okay, well, give us a basic. How can you may mention that we could hold our breath for 5 minutes with
Yep.
within one day. Can you give us kind of a rundown of how we would go about doing that, or how you would
Yep.
develop a training
Yeah.
plan to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my advice to any professional athlete, I mean, that's like the wheelhouse I work in, but really you can say anybody, because this helps everybody, right? Just making your body operate better. It's like improving your diet. So it's not just for professional athletes, but of course that's John and I's, focus and intention with a lot of the work that we're doing. I would say that the best thing that you can do, and this is how I get any of our athletes started, is you're just going to do an exercise every morning where you're going to hold your breath until the urge to breathe. And then once you have the urge to breathe, then you're going to exhale. You're going to do that for a cycle of 10. So you're going to wake up, maybe have a glass of water. Don't activate the body in a remarkable way. Don't exercise, don't have any caffeine or anything like that. You want all of that latent CO2 that's in the body from the sleep to still be present, because that's what we're actively seeking tolerance to. So because when you sleep, you're doing tidal breathing, you're breathing really shallow, you have higher levels of CO2 when you wake up than you do when you go to sleep, because you're doing very shallow breathing, you're not purging off much CO2. So that's excellent. We want to keep that CO2. So then you're going to wake up and 10 cycles of the urge to breathe. And you're just going to do that for like a couple of weeks. And that's going to improve your BOLT score, which is essentially the measurement of your resistance to CO2. And with that, all of your endurance is going to improve and get much, much, much better. So you're going to start to address this like feeling of the urge to breathe driven by your CO2. And we're not even really going to do a big breath hold yet. We're just going to introduce you to CO2 by having you do these practicum of urge to breathe exercises. And then we're going to work in a couple of different folds. One is increasing your lung volume. So the good news is that's extraordinarily easy, even for you and John. Every athlete on planet Earth should be doing exercises to increase their lung volume. And we can do that. We can give a 10% increase in lung volume to even the highest trained athletes in about 1 month. So all you're going to do there is you're going to hold your breath. We're still going to do the urge to breathe exercise. You're going to hold your breath. And then when you feel the urge to breathe, now I want you to start packing. So I pack. When I do a really big breath hold, my packing time is almost a minute, because I have so much extra lung volume that I can get, that my diaphragm's not pulling down to get to, right? So then I start packing. And it'll take everybody a few tries to learn how to like pack and like what that feels like. But you're just gonna pack and pack and pack and pack and pack, and you're not gonna move, but you're just gonna pack as much as you possibly can. And it's like inflating a balloon. So if you take a balloon and you blow it up for the first time, it's really difficult. If you blow that balloon up 10 times, now the balloon is twice the size that it used to be, even when there's no residual air volume in it, because it's been exacerbated over and over again. So we're going to do the same thing with the lungs over and over again. And it's actually going to increase the density of your alveoli in the lungs. And it's going to expand all of that like metric there. So you're going to have more sensitive relationship to your like blood barrier, that transfer process that's happening with your O2 and your CO2, is you're increasing the density of the alveoli. You're also going to increase the whole volume of your rib cage. So that's super, super important for any athlete, especially when you think about some of these sports. For example, a football player or a hockey player, they're doing all of this hypertrophy-based exercise, and they're just tightening and tightening and tightening that whole situation around the lungs. But what we should also be doing for any of these athletes is stretching that. So stretching these intercostals, stretching your back in a way that's allowing all of that pressure to not be so intense for the athlete, because when you're holding your breath, one of the biggest factors about the exchange of your O2 and your CO2 in your lungs is the amount of constriction and the pressure like delivered by the rib cage around that. So even just by increasing that lung volume and the flexibility around the rib cage, now you're having a better actuating process when you need to get rid of that CO2 and when you need to bring in more O2, because there's less pressure on that whole chamber, and it will do unbelievable things, especially for these athletes that train in a hypertrophy topical sport, like a football player who their whole life they've never done any sort of flexibility around their rib cage. Now we put them through this profile and their lung volume is increasing like 25% in a month, which is enormous. I mean, you think about what some of these sports teams pay to increase your VO2 max by 1 or 2%. You talk about giving them an extra 20% of lung volume pretty much overnight. I mean, this is like, the holy grail of increasing their performance, you know?
You're blowing my mind. Okay. And I'm sold, because the truth of the matter is it's going to sound really horrible to say, like I'm a pretty decent triathlete for a 50-year-old.
Yeah.
And I probably, and this is because I tried this earlier today, I don't think I can hold my breath for 40 seconds.
You can.
Oh, no, I'm saying like right now, like because I tried earlier today, that that's kind of where I'm like, well, I mean, sure, maybe I could have went a little longer, but that's about it for me. And if when I'm swimming, for example, I do a flip turn, I am desperate within 5 seconds to get it.
Yeah.
And I'm like enamored by this, and I totally want to learn how to do this. And so I'm taking notes as we go here, because I think that there's a lot of people kind of like me, right, that have that, especially as you get older. Like I don't remember this when I was younger, that having that pour of breath holding. And I assume that, as if we don't use it, we lose it, like everything else in life. So I'm like so excited to actually go down this road and try this stuff. So yeah, I didn't know where to go. I'm not even asking a question. I'm just blown away.
Here's like another really amazing thing that we do for lung volume. So in my like preparation, I'll take a really big breath, right? Take a few packs, maybe like 20 seconds of packing. And then I run like a pointed massage gun through the intercostals between each rib to break up some of that fascia while I'm nice and packed. So like my lung volume now is almost 9 liters, which, yours is probably around like 6. So think about having an extra 3 liters of air just from these different training activations that I'm doing with the packing exercises, and then running the massage gun like down between each rib over and over again. It's truly unique, and it changes any athlete that we've worked with really quickly too. Some of this stuff takes longer, but some of it's right off the bat. For example, the lung volume. The lung volume is almost instantaneous. We see these massive changes, and then we're increasing VO2 max and VCO2 max, and some of those take a little bit longer, but a handful of these different attributes, they come really, really fast, because if you've never stretched your shoulders in your life, then if you stretch your shoulders for a month, you're a different man, right? Or woman. And it's the same thing with this like volumetric capacity in your lungs. Most athletes that I've ever worked with, and even some really, really great athletes and, UFC fighters, and they've never worked on this. They've never worked on that stretching, which is amazing, because what that means for them is that the benefits that you're going to incur are going to be so astronomical right off the bat, because it's the first time you're ever stretching. It's the first time you're ever doing this. It's the first time you're ever doing that. And for a lot of things that we learn, take for example, if you learn to play a piano, it's frustrating in the beginning because you're terrible at it. However, at the same time, it will be the highest rate of growth for your whole career as a piano player. If you've been playing a piano for 25 years that 26th year, you're not going to get much better. But the first 3 months that you learn to play piano, you're going to go from banging on the keyboard like, you know, with no information to, well, you can kind of put a song together. And the good news about all this breath work is that for a lot of athletes, it's going to be a really, really similar situation where the growth profile is really, really fast, really, really good right off the bat. And it gives them a lot of confidence going into whatever that big challenges they have coming up, whether it's like a major competitive atmosphere or a big fight or something like that. Their growth is so unique, and they know looking across the cage that that other guy has no idea what they're about to walk into, because they're already a bad dude, you know. And then we just hooked them up with this holy grail of knowledge, and now they walk in feeling invincible because they can hold their breath for 5 minutes, so they don't feel like they can get choked out, and their endurance is off the scales, and they haven't taxed the hardware because they've been working on the software. So it's really, there's a lot to it.
I love this. And, you know, we talk a lot in triathlon and endurance sports where we look for marginal gains. You know, we look for
Yeah.
these little gains here and there, chain rings, what have you, it is. And I think this thinking about breathing in a very intentional way makes a lot of sense. And I think it goes beyond marginal gains because we do it sort of naturally, but being intentional about it, I think is really important. You know, talking about breathing rhythm and running, I always feel so much better after a swim. And part of that, I believe, is because you are forced into a rhythm of breathing that ends up being more relaxing. So I've got a couple of thoughts here. One, Ted, you mentioned you know, the doing the flip turns and losing, you know, holding your breath for that period of time. You want to pop up and get a breath right away. I think this type of approach, which is why I'm so glad you're talking about this, can actually give more confidence in open water swimming. Because in open water swimming, sometimes you're breathing and all of a sudden you get hit with a wave that you didn't see, and you've got to disrupt your breathing, but still have the confidence that you have, you know, volume in your lung that you're still going to have oxygen, or you know, you're getting kicked in the face or splashed or what have you. I think that this type of approach can be really good for reducing swim anxiety. But I'm curious, as you describe these exercises, and you're just going in this direction a little bit, when you're done, are you supposed to be exhausted or do you feel more invigorated?
So that's a bit of it's like a twofold situation there. Whenever you put your body under any kind of duress, as you know, there is a tax that comes with that. You know, there are no free lunches in growth. So you have exercised the body in a way that you're probably not used to right off the bat. However, I would say that you're also extremely invigorated, because one of the other things that we're doing with the athletes is we're training the nervous system to be more receptive of a high amount of stress.
Hmm.
And so your nervous system, we'll just call it, there's two directions for your nervous system. One is activation, the other one is rest. So if you want to activate the nervous system, the fastest, easiest way to do that is with compound lifting. Compound lifting is going to activate the nervous system faster than anything on planet Earth. And then number two for that would be high intensity interval training. So we use both of these as part of the process, because what we want to do is we're going to tax the nervous system in both directions. So when you're doing a breath hold, you're taxing the nervous system in the opposite direction. And this is another thing that's really, 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 really helpful for athletes and artists, all sorts of entertainers, when it comes to like what you were talking about, the anxiety of maybe this open water swim or whatever have you. Because when you're holding your breath, there's a really unique thing that has to happen, which is to be successful at the end of a larger breath hold, the adrenaline is going up because you're getting this information about the urge to breathe. So your body is telling you, you need to exhale. You need to purge off the CO2. You have to exhale. You have to exhale. And so you're getting this like climbing effect of your anxiety, this nervousness that's happening. So I I'm working with a couple of Broadway singers right now because what we're able to deliver for them is a tolerance to fear, essentially. Because when you hold your breath, the only way for it to be more successful is to even be more calm. So as it gets harder, you have to be more and more calm. So you're training this resistance profile to the uptake of adrenaline. I call it the autonomous beta blocker. So you know what beta blockers are. Beta blockers stop the uptake of adrenaline in the prefrontal of the brain, and they're banned in virtually every sport on planet Earth, and for good reason. And what we can do with breath holding is create a similar profile where we're creating a resistance to the uptake of adrenaline that functions really similarly as a beta blocker. So for this Broadway singer that I'm working with, by teaching her to hold her breath better and longer, she's got this built-in armor for that uptake of adrenaline. So when she goes on stage, she has this autonomous beta blocker that's built in over her training profile. So now she's killing it, right? She's not nervous at all because she's already been through harder training in the profile. And every time that she's doing these urge to breathe exercises, she's flexing that muscle that she hasn't trained before and creating that autonomous beta blocker and creating a better sense of safety, and able to sort of peel off that adrenaline intake.
Mm. This is so good. I'm gonna start tonight. So I love this because I think it is that, what do we, anecdotally, what do we say when we get nervous or we get uptight in a sporting event? We say, just breathe, just breathe.
Yeah, yeah,
Because sometimes I think we lose that natural instinct, and then that everything goes downhill from there. So
yeah.
this is just fantastic, Brandon. I am really glad that we've had you on this episode.
John, it's such an honor to work with you, buddy. I can't even tell you. I I'm so enamored with our whole team, with everybody. There's so many amazing minds, and I feel like there's not a question that I can't send to somebody, whether it's
Yeah, great.
whether it's you or Al or Don
Yeah.
and you. I mean, there's a lot of bases covered. So I feel really, really, really fortunate and honored.
Well, and it is invigorating when you have these exchange of ideas. That's like even and Ted and I were talking off air before we started. Usually we're really tired by Friday, work wise, but by the time we're done with this podcast, we're both a little bit energized and ready to go into the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well, just wait till you learn how to hold your breath for 5 minutes, and then you'll be even more invigorated. Yeah, and you get less tired through your day, and you train the blood profile, you train the
Yeah.
nervous system, you get in better tune with your heart rate. And you can take a moment and have 2 or 3 exhales and immediately drop your heart rate into like the 40s. So when I do a really, really big long breath hold, my heart rate gets down to about 30.
Mm.
And that's a superpower
Hmm.
all in and of itself.
Yeah.
And there's so much crossover in all of the professional sports world when you think about the concept of the autonomous beta blocker. Even if you're like a dart player or a pool player or
Mhm.
a baseball player,
Yeah.
that moment where you
Yeah.
have to be calm so that you can really, really zone in and focus that energy, you
Hmm.
can really knock that out of the park because you're not wasting all of this mental energy and physical energy. You're wasting both when you're not, really premium in that moment. But by doing that and having the capacity to immediately get that heart rate down, if you're a high diver or a big wave surfer, when all the chips are on the line, you've got to do something really, really unique. You need to pull the trigger
Hmm.
really, really, really hard. You can do it in a way where you have ultimate confidence in what you're about to do, and everything should be just like in your training, and you can throw as hard as you want, and you have safety in the understanding that there's no hesitation
Hmm.
right at that moment, right at the final moment before you jump. You're alleviated of a sense of hesitation. And that's what allows you to go as hard as you can with that ultimate confidence.
I love it. I mean, and this just speaks to the career that you've had in these extreme sports, diving and what have you. I mean,
Yeah.
having that ability to, sort of control your thoughts and movements is really impressive. So I love hearing your story, Brandon. This is really great to have you on here.
John, you're too sweet, brother. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's all good. I'm just, you know, we all we all have the things that make us
Yeah.
tick, right? So I happen to be relatively obsessive compulsive, and I try to use my powers for good.
So can
Yeah.
I have one last question, and I think it's the practicality of this. So you are an awesome resource in Las Vegas, and that's fantastic. But if I'm just some random person listening to this podcast, where's a good reputable source for me to get information on how to do this in a safe, effective manner? Do you have something for us, or?
Yes, I do. So actually, John and myself and Brad and Al and um, there's a lot of players involved, but we're actually launching a coursework in 1 week that will be available online to bring anybody up to a 5-minute breath hold in a really, really safe, super, clinical understanding of the whole approach. And it's about 25 videos, and it takes you through the whole process and everything from your lung volume to understanding the Bohr effect and how your O2 and CO2 have a little relationship on your hemoglobin. We cover absolutely everything. And so in about 1 week, actually, we're launching that, and you'd be able to just go online and watch it and become a superhuman pretty quick.
Can you, I mean, I don't know, honestly, I didn't even know this was happening, so shameless plug for you, but and it's great. Like, honestly, this is awesome. Do we have a title, like someone could search for something in a week,
So
or not yet?
yes, we do. But I wasn't gonna say it
Okay, that's
because
okay.
I think the website is actually live, but we're
Okay,
still we're
got it.
still moving around some different things on the site. So I don't want anybody going on it right now.
Okay,
And yeah, but
fair enough.
in about a week there'll be a really significant platform for anybody. I I actually filmed a video sometime back with a YouTuber. His name is Derek, and his channel is called Veritasium, and he's like one of the OG science YouTubers. And so I taught him to hold his breath. That video is going to launch
Mm.
here in about a week, and so there'll be a link down in the description for all of that, and then you'll be able to have a look at the training profile and increase your Bolt score and your lung volume and all of that stuff.
Awesome.
Well, Brandon, this is great, and I can't wait to see that launch. It's going to be really exciting to see your vision come, to be. And here we've kept you for an hour, and you
Oh,
stopped
it's all
on your way
good.
home to do this. I
It's all
really
good.
appreciate your time. Very generous
Yeah.
of you to do
Oh,
that, but we do
John,
need to
that's
get you
all
home.
good. All good, brother. All good. I'm sure we'll see each other this week.
Yeah.
Actually, we want to have a bit of a team meeting this week, so
Okay.
you'll see it in your inbox.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for going through
Thank
this
you.
Yeah.
fabulous information and really great story.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much. It's an honor. It really is. Some of the people that I get to be around and work with, some of these amazing minds, I'm never at a loss for the things I should be grateful for. So thank you, guys.
Awesome. All right. Have a good evening.
Good weekend,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you, guys. So
Thank you.
lovely to chat.